Once upon a time I ran a Twitter poll asking people who aren't me what game should be the subject of my next retrospective. Following the video I put out about Control, I put Dishonored up against Final Fantasy IX and Alien Isolation, and after my amazing friend and Twitch streamer Luna Mothwings put her thumb on the scale and sent some of her community to vote, Dishonored emerged victorious. That was in April, last year. Better late than never, I guess. Now, you might have listened to that story and done a double take on the title of this video. I'm sure you've noticed a very conspicuous number 2 sitting next to the word Dishonored. Because yes, this is a retrospective about Dishonored's sequel. I'm not pulling a mini bait and switch like I did with my Dark Souls 3 video, the first 10 minutes of said video being actually about Dark Souls. In my defense, I did actually play Dishonored with the view of making a video about it. See? Here's the footage I captured of it. This is me playing the original Dishonored last year. It's a really great game that you should play. There. That's my retrospective of it. And while you're at it, play Dishonored 2, because it's a really great game, and I'm about to talk about why for longer than is probably necessary. I played Dishonored 2 for the first time and only time before replaying it twice for this video back in 2016. I pre-purchased the game, preloaded it on Steam, beat it, and reviewed it within a week. It's that review, written on my blog when my blog was a blog and not a hub for posting links to my YouTube videos, that sparked this project. Here's a snippet of what past Amy said about Dishonored 2 in November 2016.
I was unfortunate enough to pick this game up for PC. A version of the game that has some fairly horrific technical problems. Some problems are relatively benign: dodgy AI, poor pathing that sees enemies walking into walls, enemies getting stuck in the scenery, a fair bit of pop-in. Some of the problems, however, are less so. The major problem is frame rate. Dishonored 2 on PC is a disaster when it comes to its frame rate. It suffers from frequent and major drops in frames. Sometimes the game runs at 60 FPS, other times it languishes in the late teens.
When it launched, Dishonored 2 was a frustrating game to try and play, and I emphasise the word try. As my younger self noted in a 6 out of 10 review, the game was plagued by a myriad of technical issues. It was a game I loved for what was buried deep beneath the crippling frame rate issues, but one I couldn't in good conscience recommend to other people. I summed it up quite well in my closing sentence.
Right now, it's an unpleasant experience to actually play thanks to constant sustained and random frame rate drops, and baffling input lag utterly killing what could have been a strong contender for Game of the Year.
That last line has stuck in my mind for 6 years. I truly believe that Dishonored 2 would have probably been my Game of the Year in 2016 were it not for the huge technical issues I faced while playing it. So while I was playing Dishonored and having a really great time playing it, my thoughts inevitably continued to drift to its sequel. I was having trouble staying focused on Dunwall, my mind instead drifting to Kornaka. And so I shelved the video and made a Dark Souls one instead. And then I took a year off from making retrospectives altogether. After finishing work on Unpacking 9 months later and checking in on my list of games to make videos about, there was only one choice. And now you're watching it. This is a redemption arc, not for the game or for Arcane Studios or anything like that. I'm not that egotistical, but for me. I can't have my final word on this game be about how buggy it was 6 years ago. Plus, past Amy called Dishonored 2 a stealth action game a bunch of times, so clearly she was an idiot. Everyone keeps telling me about how Dishonored 2, or the entire series, is one of the best stealth action games ever made, or whatever. And I mean, yeah, the stealth is really good and satisfying and a totally viable way to play the game, I guess. There are a lot of places I could start talking about what makes Dishonored 2 so special, but I think the best place to begin is with the world that Arcane created for the game. Yes, stealth is the main way you're probably going to interact with the city of Kornaka. As far as how you play the game, being a sneaky Sally is generally the best approach. Even in my Murder Circus playthrough, I use stealth quite a bit, because the stealth in Dishonored 2 is some of the best in the business. But Dishonored 2 isn't so much a stealth game as it is an immersive sim, and stealth is merely one of the tools at your disposal. And honestly, it's one of the best immersive sims I've ever played. And if you've heard me talk about the genre before, like in the update video I made where I announced this video and joked that immersive sims are objectively the best genre of video games, then you'll know that's a pretty high bar. And while I don't think Dishonored 2 clears the bar, it's definitely hanging out at the bar, with the likes of Deus Ex and Ultima Underworld and System Shock. I think that metaphor got away from me. In this chapter, I want to kick things off by talking about how the world of Dishonored 2 works, how it was built, and the extraordinary level of depth Arcane put into the game. One of the core principles of an immersive sim is reactivity. A game in this genre is built first and foremost with player freedom in mind. In most games, there will be a limited number of optimal ways to complete any given objective or to advance onto the next area or section or level. One way to think of the world of an immersive sim is like it's a pond, just existing, doing its pond thing, and living its best pond life. The player is a pebble. You drop the pebble into the pond and it creates ripples, disrupting the surface of the water and everything underneath it. And if it's an unlucky pond, it gets spotted by an arc pylon and exploded. Maybe I should just lay off the metaphors. Dishonored 2, in the best traditions of the immersive sims that have come before it, is built on consistent systems and mechanics. It's designed to feel less like a series of video game levels and more like you're interacting with an actual world. There are a lot of examples I could use to talk about how Arcane made Konica feel alive and reactive to player actions, and I'm going to run through several of varying levels of complexity. But I also wanted to acknowledge that this is going to be something I'll be revisiting throughout the video. There are some triumphs of design that are so brilliant and complex that they're going to get their own chapters. But for now, let me start with alarm clocks. They're everywhere in Konica. As a gameplay mechanic, they're quite useful. You can set them to lure enemies to specific locations. They're great for setting up ambushes or maneuvering prying eyes away from places that you want to go undetected. But because Konica has been designed to feel like a world that people live in and not just a video game playground, they only show up where you'd expect them to in the real world. You know, if the real world was a fantasy steampunk city inspired by southern European cities in the likes of Italy and Greece. They turn up in bedrooms or at people's desks. Bath salts, an item you can pick up and turn into coin used to buy items and upgrades at black market shops, appear mostly in bathrooms. Ammunition and destructive equipment like grenades and mines can only usually be found in places where it would make sense, at outposts or gang hideouts or black market shops or stuck inside dead bodies. You'll find most of your incendiary bolts, for example, inside buildings that are infested with blood flies, given that burning them is the most effective way of clearing them out, and usually next to the corpse of the poor bastard who died trying to clear out the infestation. This isn't like the accidental morbidness of Deus Ex Human Revolution, whose citizens all seem to keep guns in or on their desks loaded with a single bullet, for reasons my mental health cannot take discussing or thinking about right now. And speaking of Human Revolution, you know how frequently in other video games you'll see somewhere you want to go, or think you should be able to reach, but you're blocked off by, say, a chest-high wall or a knocked-over piece of furniture that you know you could definitely jump over, only to find there's an invisible wall behind it? Dishonored 2 doesn't do invisible walls. If you can see somewhere and you can reach it, congrats, you can go there. Heck, there's probably something cool up there. Or how about indestructible glass? We've all been foiled by a window that refuses to break, despite carrying an armory full of weapons in our pockets. In Dishonored 2, you can just open the window. Like it's, you know, a window? Or you can break the glass. In fact, there's a really cool thing you can do by breaking a skylight that I'll get into later. Locked doors can be bypassed by finding the key, like this one, with a note next to it, telling you who to pickpocket to find the key that will let you into the apartment. But you also have a gun, or as I like to call it, nature's lockpick. My point here in highlighting all these things is to demonstrate that Konica behaves a lot like you would expect, free from the video game logic we've all had ingrained in us that doors are unbreakable and windows are indestructible. Dishonored 2 constantly pushes you to ask the question, I wonder what would happen if I tried this? And the answer is usually something. Something will happen. At no point will it stop you from going somewhere just because you've wandered too far from the optimal path or outside the part of the level that has been developed. Not even if stopping will save you from overshooting a wall with far reach and see you yeet yourself off a cliff.
2 hands 6.
This consistency makes you feel like you're traveling through a living, breathing world and forms the foundations for an incredibly tight gameplay experience that constantly feels rewarding to experiment with. It makes figuring out how to get through every part of the game feel really satisfying. Take this straight, which is part of the game's second level. You've got to get from one end to the other and maybe make a pit stop inside the overseer's office on the other side if you're fixing to steal the corpse for Mindy Blanchard in exchange for help in getting to the next part of the level. There are guards patrolling because there was a queue and a very dangerous criminal is loose and potentially in Konica. Spoiler alert, you are the very dangerous criminal. There are overseers inside and outside the office building. Just up the road there are members of the Howlers gang, and there are civilians just chilling, going about their civilian life, because this is just a street in a normal city. Technically, there are only 2 ways to get past this part of the level, and every part of every level in Dishonored 2. Stealthily, or less stealthily. But because of how Dishonored 2 has been designed, there's actually a multitude of different ways you can go about accomplishing anything, that you could replay this mission 24 times and come up with different ways to get to the other end of the street, not limited to sneaking past everyone, stealthily knocking everyone out, stealthily murdering those who get in your way. Not so sneakily murdering those who get in your way. Blowing up huge crowds of people. Kicking guards off the roof of a building. Drowning guards in the river. Smashing this glass case open to release a swarm of blood flies. Accidentally causing enough of a ruckus to start a turf war between the overseers and the howlers. And this is an early section of the game, before you've had a chance to collect a bunch of runes and unlock some of the more advanced abilities that let you unleash your creativity in some pretty awesome ways. And I'm not even done making the point yet, because incredibly, there's actually another level to this. Later on in the game, you travel to the Dust District to see a man called Aramis Stilton. To get to his mansion, you need to find the solution to a complex lock, which your allies tell you can get from either Vice Overseer Bernd, leader of the Overseers, or Paolo, leader of the Howlers. You do this by infiltrating one of their bases and eliminating them, lethally or non-lethally, and then delivering them to the other, essentially taking a side in their conflict. It's very much a lesser of two evils kind of deal, where you have to weigh up the potential consequences of siding with one or the other, putting your thumb on the scale of the balance of power between the two factions. Or you can just solve the lock. And I know I'm saying that like it's easy, it's not, but it is entirely possible. The lock, created by an inventor called Kieran Jindosh, is essentially a logic grid puzzle. You can use the information you're given in the riddle that you get for it to whittle down the possible combinations until eventually you're left with the correct sequence that will unlock the door and let you proceed to the next level. It's not even that difficult to brute force your way past the puzzle. If you read the riddle, it gives you one of the combinations, which only leaves 24 possible variations to try to unlock it. If you do this, your entire experience of the Dust District level of the game is getting off the skiff, getting past this wall of light, chatting to Megan, and then crossing the street and going to Stilton's mansion, skipping about 90% of the level and an interesting and quite involving quest. Imagine going to all the trouble of designing this level, which is a really great level with a pair of buildings that is super satisfying to stealth/murder your way through, and an entire quest line that forces you to think about choices and consequences and the lesser of two evils, and then giving the players the ability to just skip it if they want. By being clever, or observant, or really pushing your abilities to their limit, or using them in clever ways, you can actually bypass a lot of Dishonored 2. The Jindosh lock isn't the only example. I could think of and show you dozens. Like skipping the final boss. No, I'm serious. Dishonored 2 has a final boss encounter where you have to fight duplicates of Delilah to force the real one to come and 1v1 you, but just hopping off this ledge and climbing up the scenery to sneak up behind her and eliminate her works too. Imagine having that confidence in your game to design some of the best levels in video games and giving players the means to circumvent them by simply learning how to play the game and experimenting with everything they can do. I was going to make a foreshadowing joke here for a chapter I had intended to put later in the video, but screw it, let's not be around the bush. Now, I want to be clear before I dive into this chapter. Every level in Dishonored 2 is at the very least great. Like, the weakest level of Dishonored 2 is probably better than all the levels in a lot of other games. There's probably an alternative timeline where I made this video and it was just a chapter by chapter breakdown of each of the game's 9 levels. I could do it. Don't challenge me. They're all really well designed and contain some wonderful designs, mechanics, and encounters. But instead, I want to focus on 2 levels in particular that are, to my mind, 2 of the best levels in video game history. The Clockwork Mansion is the first. The second will have its own chapter later on. If you've played the game, and I sincerely hope you have if you're watching this video, you'll probably already know what the second one is. In the first half of the game, you're on the trail of Anton Sokolov, a former ally of Corvo from the first game, and someone who potentially holds critical information about Delilah and how to take her down. You find out that he's being held captive by Kieran Jindosh at his mansion on the outskirts of the Aventia district. Jindosh was actually a former student of Sokolov at the Academy of Natural Philosophy, and he's hoping to convince his former teacher to help him reduce the incredibly high cost of creating his clockwork soldiers so as to create an army of them for Duke Luca Rebel. That would, naturally, be a very, very bad thing. So you carefully sneak your way through the Aventia district, making sure not to be spotted by any members of the Grand Guard, and enter his mansion. It's a weird place when you first walk in. After entering the entrance foyer, there's not really a door to allow you access into the mansion itself, just a skylight that, for some reason, doesn't actually look outside, and there's a very conspicuous lever. So you pull the lever, and then this happens.
Who would build something like this, and why?
Someone's activated one of the mechanisms in my house.
Jindosh.
My home is always open. It's one of my great curiosities, seeing how the common mind navigates these shifting rooms. I'm Kieran Jindosh, but you must know that. I invite you to continue, stranger. Just come up the stairs. Meet with me face to face in the upper hall.
Welcome to the Clockwork Mansion. This is the home of Jindosh, the grand inventor of Zirconis, and generally just a dude with questionable ethics who is really good at building things. Classic combination. He built his mansion with a pretty ingenious security system. Aside from the grand guard station there and the clockwork soldiers that he keeps as his own personal bodyguards, the entire building can be rearranged by pulling on specific levers. Even something as simple as trying to figure out how to get to the bathroom can be a trying ordeal that involves shifting the configuration of several rooms. Instead of just, walking from one room to the next, it's actually very subtle and clever character building. If you or I want to have a bath, we just go to whatever room our bathtub is in. Jindosh decided that was too pedestrian for his liking, so he incorporated this journey into his super sophisticated and incredibly complex security system. Walking to the bathtub? I'll just pull a lever so that the room reconfigures around me and brings the tub to me. That is a mood though. I wish I could pull a lever that brings my tub to me, rather than have to walk all the way to the bathroom. Bonus points if pulling the lever gently drops me directly into an already hot bubble bath. It almost redeems Jindosh for creating an army of killing machines that will be used to uphold a tyrannical dictatorship. Almost. This is such an incredibly well-designed level that is genuinely amazing to play through. The level of complexity and sheer amount of work it must have taken to make this exceptionally complex level work is mind-boggling for me, someone who doesn't really know very much about any of these things to comprehend. Level designer Dana Nightingale has some Twitter threads about the process, and also some awesome YouTube videos to some early test footage for the level, both of which are linked in this video description. And also, shout out to the Dunwall guard that appears in the corner of the footage that warns you you're dropping below 30 frames per second. That's a really cute touch. Working your way through the mansion to reach Jindosh and Sokolov, who are practically at opposite ends of the level, is an absolute delight. You take the already excellent design philosophy of a standard Dishonored level, well thought out guard patrols, multiple approaches to getting through each room, all that good stuff, and then you add in the ability to pull a lever and completely change the configuration of the level around or in front of you. And, in the infamous words of Todd Howard, it just works. It sounds incredibly complicated and hard to navigate, but in the moment it's all very easy and superbly enjoyable to adapt to it. And your enemies adapt to these changes as well, which is just incredible AI programming. I just want to also very quickly shout out how amazing the Clockwork soldiers themselves are. You'll have seen these enemies before during the game's opening, where they're acting as bodyguards to Duke Bell as he initiates his coup. But the mansion is the first time you've got to deal with them directly. Their design is great. They're vicious in open combat, swinging 4 sword arms at you and generally ruining your entire day if you're foolish enough to engage them in a sword fight. Sneaking up on them is made difficult by the fact that they literally have eyes in the back of their heads and are looking in 2 directions at once. Dealing with them effectively requires a totally different approach to dealing with human enemies, but despite the initial intimidation you might feel when you first encounter one, there are ways to deal with them effectively. If you can knock off a metal plate on their back, you can expose their weak point, which requires just a quick stab to cause them to self-destruct. You can also decapitate them, which won't kill them, but will make it so they can't see anymore. This causes the soldiers to increase their hearing, meaning you'll need to be very quiet to get around them, but also means they can be tricked into, say, attacking your enemies for you if they make even the slightest bit of noise, because they register any noise as a threat. Which seems like a pretty big design oversight, but having met Jindosh, I can totally buy that he would think this feature is a tremendous idea and then not bother testing it to make sure it's not an awful mistake. He's the original Silicon Valley tech bro. Bonus points if you manipulate this staggering oversight and safety design to get a clockwork soldier to incapacitate him for you. And so you make your way through the mansion, adapting to this new enemy type and the shifting floors and walls of the building itself, all while Jindosh tracks your movements via pressure plates in the floors, and the fact that you're pulling all of his levers, to boast a monologue in true villainous fashion, eventually doing what he assumed was impossible and reaching his innermost sanctum. But remember that weird skylight I talked about at the beginning of this chapter? I'm sure you do, you've got a great memory. Instead of pulling the lever that alerts Jindosh to your presence and unfolds the main reception room of the mansion before you, what if you just shut out the skylight and teleported up there? Well, that takes you behind the scenes of this Rubik's Cube of a building. Instead of working your way through Jindosh's security system, you can instead work your way around it, crawling through the walls of the system without him ever knowing you were there until you eliminate him. Imagine creating a level as complex and intricate as the Clockwork Mansion, a level so satisfying to play through that it's arguably one of the most memorable in 3D gaming history, but also giving players the ability to bypass a huge part of just what makes it amazing. That's a massive level of commitment to the conventions of the immersive sim. If you're paying attention when you walk into the entrance foyer, there's an alternative path that's begging for you to explore. And in fact, there's several other opportunities to get behind the scenes of the mansion and bypass Jindosh's intended design because of how the two different paths intersect with one another several times. Depending on whether you take the more straightforward approach or the sneaky approach, there are entire parts of this level you'll never even see. You'll converge on the assessment chamber from two entirely different directions and never need to see what was down the other path you didn't take to get here. This is just a huge flex on the part of the development team. The true joy of Dishonored 2 is, when it's boiled down to its most basic form, figuring out how to get from one side of a room to the other. Even if you immediately spot the skylight and never even think to pull any of the levers in the Clockwork Mansion, the core design of the game is so strong that this is still an amazing level. With the Clockwork Mansion, Arcane created something incredible, but trust that its players will have a great time whether they're interacting with its most fantastic elements or not. And they're right, regardless of how players move through it. This level is brilliant. In fact, that trust and commitment to player freedom is one of the core reasons why the Clockwork Mansion and Dishonored 2 as a whole feel so amazing to play. Most of the games, if they had created something as exceptional and complex and impressive as the Clockwork Mansion, would have funneled you through the path that had you interacting with the levers. And that's not necessarily bad design. If I had created one of the coolest things in modern gaming, I might be tempted to do the same to make sure players saw my cool thing and really appreciate it. But Dishonored 2 is better than me, creating an amazing thing and letting you bypass it if you want to. You even get an achievement for it. The mansion is a microcosm of the design philosophy of Arcane, a philosophy that creates exceptional mechanics, moments, set pieces, and levels, and then gives players the freedom to bypass most of them if they can figure out how. Okay, so because I moved this chapter to be earlier in the video, I don't really have a good segue into the next one, and I could try and figure one out, but that sounds like a lot of work. So here's some footage of one of my favourite funny things you can do in the Clockwork Mansion instead. Have fun.
Who are you and what have you done?
Do you know how long we've waited for this
We're
appointment?
waiting for Kirin Jindosh. Leave us be.
So I've talked a lot about the different ways you can approach Dishonored 2, whether that be loud and violent, or quiet and less violent, or maybe somewhere in between, or some combination, or something entirely different altogether. Those are the choices you can make. Now it's time to talk about the natural enemy of choices, consequences. The finding out after you spent an entire game fucking around. The game does this via its chaos system. Rather than simply picking the blue option or the red option to determine whether you're a good person or not, Dishonored 2 is, at all times, judging you for your actions. A bit like your parents. Or maybe that's just me. Depending on how you choose to spend your fun time Karnica vacation, the game gives you either a low chaos or high chaos rating. Chaos really is a great word to describe what you're being judged on as well. You get a low chaos rating if you kill few or no people. Accidents happen, I'm not going to judge. Or if you don't get spotted too much, and generally don't go around causing absolute havoc and mayhem. Basically, playing the game as if it's a stealth game, knocking out guards instead of murdering them, and finding alternative ways to eliminate your targets will see you get a low chaos rating. You get a high chaos rating by, well, there are two vastly distinct ways to play Dishonored 2. Well, there are more than two. You can mix and match between high chaos and low chaos playstyles, or you can take high chaos up a notch and murder literally everyone. Everyone! But let's focus on the two main ones. There are a lot of nuances to how chaos works in the game, which we'll dig into later, but for now, they can neatly be split into killing people and not killing people. No matter whether you choose to focus on stealth or combat, taking out those who stand in your way lethally or non-lethally, or even going through levels like a ghost leaving your enemies unsure if you were ever there or not, Dishonored 2 feels fantastic. One of the main reasons for this are the tools and abilities you have at your disposal. You start out with a quick introductory scene playing as Emily Caldwin, Empress of Dunwall, before the Duke of Socornus turns up with your long-lost Aunt Delilah, who has a more legitimate claim to the throne apparently. A coup quickly starts as Emily and the Royal Protector and protagonist of the first game, Corvo Rotano, are framed for a series of brutal murders by someone called the Crown Killer. Corvo straight up stabs Delilah in the heart, but she shrugs this off and neutralizes Corvo's void powers while she's at it. And then you get to choose whether to play as Emily or Corvo and get dragged off and locked up, with the character you didn't choose to play as getting turned to stone by Delilah in the middle of the throne room. Family reunions, am I right? Your choice of protagonist is pretty important here. There's a few different ways this affects your playthrough, but the main one we're going to focus on right now is in playstyle. Over the course of the first couple of levels, both Emily and Corvo quickly gain access to the folding blade, crossbow, and gun as their primary three pieces of equipment. You'll also be able to make use of various different types of ammunition for the crossbow, from incendiary bolts to sleep darts, and a bunch of other tools, such as rewiring tools for short-circuiting things like watchtowers or clockwork soldiers, and a variety of explosives and mines. Some of this will be more useful than others depending on the type of running you're doing. If you're trying to avoid killing, you're not going to get too much use out of spring razor traps or grenades. Conversely, if you've decided to treat Karnica like your own personal purge, you probably won't be using too many sleep darts. The differences between Emily and Corvo come from the abilities they can use. After escaping Dunwall with the help of the mysterious Megan Foster and her ship, the Dreaded Whale, you end up being pulled into the void to chat with the Outsider, who offers you some cool superpowers to help you take out Delilah and her allies. Or you could choose to refuse the Outsider's help and play a Flesh and Steel playthrough, which is a run without any powers at all, which sounds like a pretty interesting challenge I may one day go back for, but I didn't do it this time. Emily and Corvo play really differently, and not just because I used the dual protagonist system to play Emily as a more restrained and introspective on a path towards redemption rather than simply vengeance, whereas I played Corvo as a... Both characters have a traversal ability at their disposal, but even this is fundamentally different. Corvo has Blink, the same ability as in the previous Dishonored, which allows him to teleport short distances. Emily has Far Reach, which is like a supernatural grapple that pulls her around. It also has a slightly longer range than Blink, but means you can be spotted while using it. It also has that momentum I mentioned earlier. Even their potential upgrades differ. Blink can be upgraded to have a longer range, stop time if you use it and you're not moving, and throw enemies to the ground by attacking them as Blink ends. Far Reach can be upgraded to pull objects towards you, slow down time if you use it while you're falling, and pull enemies towards you. Which sounds amazing, but sadly, I have no footage of this because I invested my runes in other abilities. Those other abilities were definitely worth investing in though. One of the coolest things about Dishonored 2's design is that you definitely won't be able to afford every power upgrade in a single playthrough, so you have to pick and choose what powers and upgrades you want to go for, tailoring the available abilities to the playstyle you want. It doesn't really matter what you choose to invest your runes in, because you're going to have a fantastic time no matter what. While playing as Emily, I invested heavily in her Domino ability, which let me supernaturally link up to 4 enemies together, so that if I knocked out one, I'd knock out all 4, and also in Shadow Walk, which let me turn into a shadow monster and crawl around the levels scaring the shit out of everyone and choking them on shadows, which is metal as fuck by the way. I chose those 2 abilities because they fit neatly into the way I was playing the game, stealthily but fully confident in my total lack of skill when it came to actually being stealthy and knowing I'd have to KO most of the guards in my path or I'd end up getting spotted. A lot, which itself isn't a deal breaker for playing non-lethally, because even in sword fights you can use your parry ability to open up enemies to be stunned and then choked out. Even the powers I didn't end up unlocking, like Mesmerize, which creates a shadow that distracts enemies, sounded really cool. On the Corvo side, I ended up focusing on upgrading his health and anything that would help me in straight up combat, such as the skill that gave me bullet time if I aimed a weapon while sliding. The only power I unlocked aside from Blink was Time Bend, which slowed down time to let me more efficiently murder a room full of people, and eventually upgraded it to stop time altogether, which let me do absolutely ridiculous things like this. Honestly, this felt a little OP. It didn't stop me using it a bunch though. It's just so satisfying. But therein lies the real beauty of Dishonored 2's core design and why the game feels so good to play. Time Stop isn't overpowered, it's just something you can unlock with a big rune investment if you want to use it. Creativity in the way you approach the game and use the huge amount of tools and powers you have at your disposal is at the heart of Dishonored 2. Each level is a playground, intricately and precisely designed and set up to allow you to interact with it however you want. The world is designed around player choice to a frankly absurd degree. You're handed the tools and set loose on each of the game's 9 levels with very few restrictions. If you can look at any one piece of the game and think, I wonder if I can do X, the chances are you can probably do X and something cool will happen. Every level, power, tool, encounter, it's all been designed so incredibly well that no matter how you decide you want to play through it, the game will adapt and will be exceptionally satisfying as it does so. I chose the powers that I invested in for Emily and Corvo based on how I wanted to play, stealthily and non-stealthily respectively. But if I flipped those playthroughs, even while investing in the exact same powers, the game would still feel incredibly satisfying. I mean, stopping time would definitely be useful for stealth. Heck, I might even be able to actually be stealthy for once, and not have to knock everyone out to ensure my total ineptitude at being sneaky didn't fuck me over. And I mean, being able to turn into a shadow monster and link the fates of multiple gods together could definitely come in handy for some murdering. The other main ways your chaos rating affects you is the character arc your chosen protagonist experiences and the world around you. You get gameplay changes, blood flies are attracted by dead bodies, so if your quest ends up leaving a lot of dead bodies lying everywhere, you'll find more blood fly nests appearing later in the game. But the effects of chaos run deeper than simply adding a few extra bloodfly nests or clockwork soldiers to later levels. When you arrive in Karnaca, you're given a quick rundown of the situation of the city. This is a place that was once quite prosperous, before the new Duke took over and began to systematically extract all of the wealth out of the city for his own personal gains. I wonder why that sounds so familiar. Not that you really need Megan to explain any of this to you, the societal and systemic problems of Karnaca become fairly apparent as you explore it. Entire buildings have been condemned due to bloodfly infestations, poverty, and terrible living conditions are rampant, and it's quite easy to get mugged by gang members if you wander down the wrong alley. Oh, you know, we can try.
You shouldn't have wandered outside without...
Seeing this sets up an interesting character arc for both protagonists, but I want to focus on Emily's, both in the interests of time and because I really vibed with her storyline more. Emily has been the Empress of Dunwall since her mother was murdered in the first game, more or less, and her power does extend as far as Karnaca. But she spent most of her time uninterested in ruling, more content to nod through her council meetings without listening, engaging her father in training, and sneaking away from the castle at night to adventure across the city. And while she wasn't paying attention to what was happening across her empire, Luca Rebel, the current Duke of Serkonos, took power after his father passed away and proceeded to make the lives and conditions of those in Karnaca as miserable as he could get away with. And he could get away with a lot, thanks to a disinterested empress and a ruling council who were content as long as the silver kept flowing from the mining town. And so Emily has to confront a situation that her ignorance helped cause. While she was certainly not directly responsible for the currently awful conditions in Karnaca, she's the empress who allowed it to happen. It's something she grapples with throughout the entire game, either coming to terms with her need to be a better leader for her people, or being consumed by her desire for revenge and writing off Karnaca as a lost cause and acceptable collateral damage, depending on your chaos level. Her voice lines, commentary, and the way she interacts with her allies and enemies changes depending on her approach to the world around her, either becoming contrite and determined to be better, or determining that she needs to be stronger and more ruthless to avoid something like Delilah's Q happening again. It's not just the protagonist's personal story arc that changes depending on your chaos level though, it's also the world itself. Once you disembark from the skiff and into the city for the first time, if you head left towards the black market, you'll almost immediately come across a group having a dispute. A boat captain was meant to be delivering supplies to this group, but lost the cargo en route. Depending on your chaos level, this dispute plays out quite differently. At low chaos, the response to the lost cargo is more empathetic and understanding, with the captain pledging to make things right. At high chaos, everyone is angry and a fight breaks out, with the ship captain beating one of the group to death with a pipe. There's no way that your actions in the previous level, the only level of the game you'll have played by this point, could possibly have directly affected this dispute. Instead, Dishonored 2 uses your chaos level in more subtle ways, influencing the world around you by holding a mirror up to your actions in the form of Karnaca itself. Being more empathetic and restrained over being vengeful and angry is the difference between this rooftop disagreement ending with a hug between friends, or jealousy bubbling over and seeing someone thrown over the edge. So, with all of that being said, let's talk about everyone's favourite topic, morality and ethics. If you take the mechanics of the chaos system at face value, Dishonored 2's morality system appears fairly basic. Killing people is bad, and not killing people is good. However, as we just talked about in the previous chapter, Dishonored 2 is very subtle, with quite a few of its consequences to the choices you're making as you pilot your protagonist through the streets and institutions of Karnaca. And that extends to a small but wonderful piece of design in the game, the heart. You grab the heart during your first visit to the Void, the one that grants you your supernatural powers, and it's a pretty useful tool on your tool belt. Wait, where do Corvo and Emily keep all of this stuff? Mechanically, the heart fulfills an incredibly important function. When you have it equipped, it will show you where all of the runes and bone charms in the entire level are. You can even lock one onto your HUD to keep track of it should you need to put the heart away to use your other hand to teleport or blow something up. But I wanted to give the heart its own chapter because it cannot be overstated how much depth it adds to Karnaca if you use it to its fullest potential. A lot of this video is focused on talking about how well realised the world of Dishonored 2 is, from how well designed its levels are to how reactive and immersive the city itself is, both directly via its gameplay and indirectly via how the chaos system subtly mirrors your intentions. But we haven't talked about the heart yet, which is a fantastic tool for world building that both ties the world design together and adds texture to Dishonored 2's sense of ethics. The heart isn't just a tool that lets you find useful collectibles hidden throughout the game's levels, it also contains a piece of the soul of Jessamine Caldwin, the former Empress of Dunwall, whose assassination kickstarts the events of the previous game. She's also Emily's mother and Corvo's former lover. Her role in the narrative is important, but she also serves a second purpose. If you have the heart equipped and you use it while looking at an NPC, Jessamine will share one of their deepest secrets with you. Arcane went all in on making sure if you point the heart at anyone, you're going to hear something from their life. There are... 702... shitloads of quotes that can be used for anyone from major NPCs to dock workers, servants, the homeless, nest keepers, shopkeepers, everyone. You can even get lines for the various parts of the city you're in. Dishonored 2's writers put a ton of work into this. Because low chaos is generally achieved by not killing anyone and results in the game's best ending where Karnaca has a chance of being saved, and high chaos is achieved by dropping bodies, dooming Karnaca in the process, it seems pretty straightforward. Killing people bad, not killing them good. But one of the extremely clever things about how the heart works is that it throws a wrench into these presumptions. Let me explain by posing you with an ethical dilemma, everybody's favourite part of a video game essay. You're wandering the streets of Karnaca, the heart's voice whispering the secrets of the people you see in the street to you, and you come across this quote.
She tells the children it's just tea. And after they're asleep, they are put on boats bound for Morley. This is a demo.
So, what do? If you're acting under the assumption that killing people is bad, do you leave this woman alone to continue to drug children and pack them away on a boat for who knows what purpose? You can't alert the authorities because, well, one, they'd be much more interested in killing you than listening to what you have to say, and two, they're cops. Not only that, they work for this guy.
Sarkonis is a land of riches. Yes, some people are poor because they're lazy. It's true that across our capital city there are abandoned buildings full of blood flies. There have always been blood flies. There always will be. It's the way of the world. Things rot. They fall apart. You squeeze out every drop of wine you can, then you pass into nothing. You can put that on my tombstone.
They're more likely to commend this woman than arrest her or seek her out to try and take a cut in her operation. You can knock her out, but that's not really going to solve anything, is it? Once the sleep dart or chokehold wears off, she'll wake up and then keep shipping kids off to Morley, perhaps puzzled by the nap she just took on the street corner. That guard who is trying to stick his sword in your gut might give his spare money to orphans on the street. That man, who assures you he won't turn you into the gods, might regularly be his son. At any moment, thanks to the insights you're granted from the heart, easy questions about what is or isn't right can become just a little bit more difficult. Not all the time. Some people are definitely irredeemable.
She baked their cat into a pie and brought it to them. She called it a little peace offering.
This seemingly minor mechanic adds a lot to Emily and Corvo's character arcs through the game, as they grapple with the circumstances that have befallen them, the way they've lived their lives, and the choices that they're making as they fight to remove Delilah from the throne. Whether those choices are high chaos or low chaos, the insights of Jessamine can add an extra layer of depth to these journeys. If you use the heart on a lot of people as you play through the game, you're going to quickly realise that there aren't too many upstanding citizens in Karnaca. While not everyone is a serial killer or a rapist or a child abuser, and there are still some good people in the city, a lot of the people you come across aren't particularly great. Maybe they're victims of circumstance? Living under the oppressive Boudicca rebel for so long could have corrupted the citizens under his watch. But aren't people responsible for their own actions and choices, regardless of their societal circumstances? After all, a decent number of people live under his tyrannical regime and still find ways to do good. As Corvo or Emily learn more about them, it enhances their respective character arcs. Karnaca is a city on the brink, ready to tear itself apart or collapse. With so many horrible people living within, can it even be saved? Is it worth fighting for a better future either way, or are the city and the people who live within a write-off and not worth the trouble? These questions of morality and definitions of high chaos and low chaos also extend to how you can deal with your assassination targets. Your first target is Dr. Alexandria Hypatia, chief alchemist at the Adamaya Institute. You're looking for Alexander Sokolov, a former ally of Corvo's, who could potentially help you figure out where Delilah came from. Trouble is, he was taken by the Crown Killer, who's been murdering opponents of Emily's rule in an attempt to frame her for ordering the killings, and is supposedly hiding out at the Adamaya Institute. It turns out Hypatia is the Crown Killer. She's the inventor of Adamaya, a substance that you use to replenish your mana bar. An early experiment during the creation of the solution created a second persona in her head, one that is vicious, violent, and very much enjoys killing. While Hypatia is unaware of this second personality, the Duke isn't, and uses her to carry out some of his more brutal tasks. When this is revealed, you're tasked with eliminating her. You can put an end to her there and then, killing her as she attacks you and tries to kill you, or, if you've talked to her dying assistant, you can create a cure for a condition elsewhere in the Institute, saving her from a brutal counterpart, and freeing her from the affliction that is clearly affecting her mind. Doing the latter unquestionably allows you to put some good out into the world. Hypatia is a thoroughly decent person. If you use the heart on her, you can learn that she cares for her patients and often refuses their money. Though not that she's secretly a killing machine, thanks for nothing I guess, Jessamine. Being able to unambiguously do the right thing in Dishonored 2 is a rarity you shouldn't get used to, however. The trail for Sokolov sends you to the Clockwork Mansion, like we talked about earlier, and you have to decide how to deal with Jindosh. Again, you can't simply kill him outright, but this being a Dishonored game, you can uncover a second option, which is the low chaos alternative. Jindosh has been holding Sokolov in his mansion. He had hoped to convince the Elder Artist to help him create what he considers to be a brighter future for the Empire. But since Sokolov refuses, he's instead been subjecting him to electroshock in his lab. If you incapacitate Jindosh, you can carry him down to his laboratory, power up the electroshock machine, and scramble his brain, thus ending his threat once and for all.
I'm very much afraid of what's happened.
Yep, I am definitely a good person.
Please, kill me. Please make me die.
Jesus Christ, what the fuck? Jindosh definitely needed to be dealt with one way or another. He's not a good person, as you'll learn when you make your way through his mansion and learn exactly what he's all about. But is this any better? There are frequently no objectively correct answers. That's what makes Dishonored 2's moral questions so compelling. The most interesting games ask you to figure out what's right or wrong in such a way as to force you to engage with the fiction and actually think about the choices you're making, rather than just offering you a blue or red choice that removes all agency and thought for the morality of what you're doing, as if the game is somehow the supreme arbiter of what is or isn't the right thing to do, when it's actually super unclear and would be a much more powerful moment if you weren't just doing a mindless good guy or bad guy playthrough. What was I talking about again? Alright, Dishonored. Earlier in the video we talked about the Clockwork Mansion and its mind-blowingly incredible design. It's one of the coolest levels I've ever played in a video game, the kind of confluence of level and gameplay design that only comes around a couple of times per console generation. In a game packed end-to-end with excellent level design, the Clockwork Mansion stands out as truly breathtaking. And if I had a nickel for every time Dishonored 2 blew my mind with an extraordinarily designed level, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. This might be a shorter chapter than the others. When I tried to wrap my head around the intricacies of how a crack in the slab was designed, as someone who doesn't design video game levels, I felt a dull throbbing pain in my head, and my vision turned to a red haze as I lost consciousness. I awoke on a ferry to Leon 17 hours later. The door to my cabin was chained up from the inside. The walls were covered in strange alien symbols, and I could hear sharp scratching noises coming from all around me, as the sound of static grew ever more prominent. A crack in the slab begins after you've solved the Jindosh lock in the Dust District. 3 years earlier, something happened at the mansion of Aramis Stilton, something that might be related to where Delilah came from and why she seemingly can't be killed. Stilton, the benevolent head of Cornica's silver mines, hasn't been seen or heard from since. When you approach his mansion, it's fallen into a state of disrepair, seemingly abandoned for the years since whatever transpired that fateful day. The building is falling apart, detritus and rubbish is strewn everywhere throughout. There are literal holes in the floors and walls, and further into the mansion, bloodfly nests have taken hold. And if you need any more indication that something is deeply wrong here, your powers aren't working. You eventually find Stilton himself, not dead, but clearly having lost his mind. He's sitting in a decrepit room muttering and mumbling to himself in front of a piano, clearly unable to coherently answer questions about anything. The outsider appears to fill you in. Whatever took place here 3 years ago is still happening, and that it left a hole in the void that is leaking through. He urges you to make your way to the centre of the house and see for yourself what the Duke and Delilah did, leaving you a timepiece. Though his choice of words indicate that it's not a timepiece, more that Emily or Corvo imagine whatever the device is as a timepiece, because that makes sense to them. It's quite clever. Taking the timepiece and using it causes you to jump back in time. Suddenly you're standing in the same manner, but during the height of its glory. It's the night of whatever transpired, and the Duke is awaiting his guests. Dr. Hypatia, in her guise as the Crown Killer, or Grim Alex as she was known as, Kieran Jindosh, Brianna Ashworth, and Duke Luca Rebel. Now, I usually hate games that feature a level or section that take away your powers or equipment. Usually if a game has been built around using cool abilities, those cool abilities are generally a core part of why I'm enjoying the game. At least that's what I usually find. One way to mitigate this, it turns out, is to replace your cool abilities with a time-traveling pocket watch. The entirety of A Crack in the Slab is constructed around being able to teleport yourself between the two time periods at will, more or less, and let me tell you, the combination of hopping between the past and the present with Dishonored 2's core mechanics is fucking amazing. That's not actually what I wrote in the script. I just decided to go with fucking amazing. Because it's fucking amazing. In the present, the mansion is mostly empty, save for a section covered in bloodfly nests with a pair of nest keepers. The past mansion functions essentially like a typical Dishonored 2 level, an excellently designed space to sneak your way through, around, or fight your way through, stuffed with secrets to find, but with an added caveat of being able to appear and disappear at will, provided you're not standing in a place that is blocked in the other timeline. For example, if you're in the past and the spot you're occupying in the present is taken up by a bloodfly nest, you won't be able to use the timepiece. Nor would I imagine you would want to. Naturally, this has huge ramifications on how you can navigate and approach the entire level. Some of this is just figuring out how to get past an obstacle or a locked door, except because of time travel shenanigans, this can actually be both simultaneously. Instead of just finding a key to a locked door or finding a way around the blockage, both problems coexist. So you need to find a key in the present to unlock the door in the past, which lets you pass through the door in the past and teleport back to the present, which is how you bypass the fact that the door is locked. And then you go back to the past, shoot the support struts of this balcony, which means that in the present the balcony has collapsed and it lets you climb it. So you can explore the upper floor in the past, because obviously A Crack in the Slab features cause and effect.
Future is the past is the future. It all gives me a headache.
This also, as you might imagine, has quite a substantial impact on how you navigate around enemies in both low and high chaos playthroughs. My high chaos playthrough was a mess, considering I accidentally alerted every member of the Grand Guard to my presence and had about a dozen of them trying to fucking kill me in the butterfly room. However, thanks to the timepiece, this wasn't really a problem. With some tactical use of positioning and a complete disregard for the butterfly effect, the guards were easy to deal with. I could use the timepiece's secondary ability, unfolding it to see what's happening in whichever timeline you're not in, to get behind a guard, zip back in time, kill them, and then zip forward in time again. I can only imagine what was going through their heads as Corvo kept blinking in and out of existence, like some kind of phasing murder tornado. But it probably looked pretty cool, as long as I don't think about causality.
Don't touch anything! I'll touch whatever I feel like!
Stealth-wise, I mean, do I even really need to explain why being able to zip back and forth across timelines would be useful for stealth? Being able to pop in and out of existence at will lets you be a lot more aggressive with your knockouts than you're used to, which is good considering you don't have access to your powers. But who needs Domino to knock all of these guards out when you can just pick them off one at a time, blinking away to avoid any dangerous retaliations? A Crack in the Slab is truly a marvel. It essentially is two versions of the same level that both exist simultaneously, both running in real time. Because you can see between the two of them using the timepiece, both versions need to be constantly running at all times. One version of the level is basically running way above the other one, and you're essentially teleporting between them. Designing one level for players to play through is challenging enough. Designing two different versions of the same level to both be played through at the same time, with puzzles that require these levels to almost flow into one another and back again, that's fucking amazing design. And yeah, that's basically Crack in the Slab. You make your way through the matter to get the combination to enter Stilton's private chambers, so you can see what Delilah and the Duke did there in the past. Or you can knock Stilton out. Alright, so when you get to the combination for Stilton's private chambers, it's written on a ledger right behind him. So you've got to appear behind him from the present and quickly read the ledger before he turns around again. It's pretty intense. But Dishonored 2 is an immersive sim, and as we've talked about at length, one of their core principles is letting players do whatever the hell they want. if Aramis Stilton exists in the world as an NPC and you can reach him, then you can interact with him. And if you can interact with him, then you can kill him or knock him out. Cause and effect, baby. Killing Stilton in the past means that he wasn't present for the seance organised by Brianna Ashworth to resurrect Delilah and store her soul in a statue. That's what was going down in the manor 3 years ago. He's also not where you left him in the present because he's been fucking dead for 3 years. But what if you knock him out? Well, he can't go to the seance being unconscious, so his mind doesn't, in the words of the outsider, snap. So you can sleep dart him, punch him in the head, choke him out, however you choose to do it, and then you teleport back to the present, and boom! Butterfly effect. The mansion isn't falling apart, or even abandoned. It's actually filled with staff now, and Stilton is alive and still doing his thing. When you finish the level and leave the mansion grounds, even the Dust District has changed. The district is in better condition, thanks to Stilton still being alive and fighting with the Duke for better rights and working conditions for his miners. You can even get to hear an announcement for the Duke to really hammer home the point.
This is the Duke of Secundus. At the request of Aramis Stilton, I'm told I need to present another set of warrants. For safety. Certainly not for time. You should all thank Stilton. The only one of you lazy rich for anything. Back to work.
This is chef's kiss. Just fantastic game design. Arcane could have squirreled Stilton away somewhere in the level so you can't reach or interact with him, or they could have set it up so even if you knock him out, you still turned up to the seance. So like, hey guys, sorry I'm late, someone in a mask punched me in the head for some reason. What's going on in here? But no, Arcane leaned into the total player freedom that comes with being an immersive sim and gave you the ability to make substantial changes to the world of the game and then really follow through on those changes. This game is just the best. I wanted to play through Dishonored 2 and make this video because my initial experience with the game in 2016 was marred with bugs and glitches that made enjoying the game very difficult. My hypothesis was that 6 years and many patches later, I'd find a game that I could happily count among one of my favourites. And while I still did find a bug or two, what the hell, where am I? Help me. This was a much better overall experience. In fact, I can easily say that Dishonored 2 overshot my expectations. I came in expecting to find a very good video game, and instead, I found a masterpiece of game design, of level design, of environmental details, and of storytelling. As I've been playing through the game again, another reason has emerged for this video's existence. Dishonored 2 doesn't get nearly enough recognition for its sheer, unfiltered brilliance. That might sound silly given that the game received huge critical acclaim and won the Game Awards Best Action Adventure Game, PC Gamer's Game of the Year 2016, and Best Costume Design at the National Academy of Video Game Trade Reviewers, which is a thing apparently. The game's sales were, from what I can tell from my research, around 40% down on its predecessors at launch, selling an estimated 2.5 million copies on all platforms in its lifetime, against an estimated 5.6 million for Dishonored. I don't know how accurate those numbers are, but I've pulled them from multiple sources, and the fact that a third game doesn't appear to be in the works seems to back up Dishonored 2's disappointing sales. And the people that did play the game seemingly don't talk about it much now. I can't remember the last time I saw Dishonored 2 even come up, except as a footnote in articles about Deathloop, mentioned in passing as a thing Arcane worked on in the past, which for a game as exceptional as this is shocking. I hope as Arcane continues to make some of the best games that they receive more and more recognition for their work, and that recognition brings people back to Dishonored 2. Its existence in Game Pass certainly can't hurt. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll get a third Dishonored game that builds upon the first two games and explodes in popularity in the way that the series and the developer deserves. For now, however, I can safely conclude that my initial speculation, all the way back in my terribly written 2016 review, was spot on. Not only would a relatively bug-free Dishonored 2 have been a Game of the Year contender back then, but I feel safe in the knowledge that it would have been my outright Game of the Year. And so, I can fix at least one wrong, and replace my original Game of the Year for 2016, Final Fantasy 15? I called Final Fantasy 15 my Game of the Year in 2016? What the fuck?
the sands of sweet Serkonos did we bathe in the
Okay, so I'm recording this outro after having had the flu for more than 2 weeks, so hopefully it sounds okay. So first off, I want to give a few shout-outs as usual. My first shout-out is to Luna, who did the voiceover of Past Amy and her terrible review. She's amazing and a really good friend. You should follow her because she's also an amazing content creator over on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram at Luna Mothwings. Go follow all of those places. I also want to shout out Dana Nightingale, who's one of the level designers on the Clockwork Mansion. She's also one of my game dev heroes, and she let me borrow a clip from one of her proof of concept videos. And you know what? Shout out to Arcane Studios in general, because immersive sims are like few and far between these days. So respect to the studio for keeping the genre alive with games like Dishonored and Deathloop, and you know, Prey as well. Prey was a cool game. So next up, I know I said Mass Effect would be next up, but it's probably not going to be Mass Effect next. I'm basically going to need to play through the whole trilogy twice. That's going to take a while. So to avoid burning out on it and also avoid not making like another huge gap between videos, I'll probably work on some smaller videos. Although this is me, so who knows how big those smaller videos will actually end up being. Thank you, lastly, from the bottom of my heart, because if you've watched and enjoyed this video, that's amazing. I'm going to get out of here because my voice is fucked. I probably sound way bad, especially compared to like the video that you just watched. I apologize for that. I also want to edit this outro and finally finish this video so I can sleep for a week. So thanks for watching, stay hydrated, and just have a wonderful day.
So meet me in the shadows, bring your sweetest grapes. We'll slip on to a whaler, and maybe we'll escape.